Good to see everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Hello.
So
Hello,
we'll take
hello.
a couple of minutes to let everyone in and say hello. All right. I see Randy.
Yeah, Randy's coming around. We share the screen.
Miss Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Oh.
All right, everyone. I'm going to start by talking about our norms. So this is Let's Talk About Culture, Chapter 10. We are using Cultural Proficiency, a Manual for School Leaders, 4th edition. We are discussing the content of the work. This is not a critique of the work. This is a deeper dive to sharpen your tools. And this evening, I am excited to announce our featured guest, Dr. Trudy T. Arriaga. And I am more than honored because Dr. Trudy T. Arriaga was privileged to serve as the first female superintendent for Ventura Unified School District for 14 years. When I talked to her earlier, I said, I wish I could just take all the conversations that she's had and decisions she's had to make and turn it into a resource list. Because to be a superintendent for 14 years, you've had to have had some major conversations and brought about positive change. So thank you. Also, she's an author of 2 books, co-author of 2 books that she will share. And there's more work that she's done that I will not share at this moment. I want to give it over to our featured guest this evening, Dr. Trudy T. Arriaga. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's really great to see such a esteemed group of friends and educators and advocates. And I think before I start, just my really brief opportunity, privilege really to speak before all of you. I'd really like to start by taking a moment again this week to just address the where we are as a nation and the absolute horrific modern day lynching of George Floyd and the justifiable outcry and protests of people throughout this nation. You know, I think I particularly take my ability to speak in front of others very seriously at this time, and recognizing that those of us who have forums where whether we're teaching or whether we're leading or consulting or writing, whatever it is that we're doing, if we have that forum, that's a tremendous privilege, but I also take it as a tremendous responsibility. And so I guess I just want to say to you as my colleagues that I will continue to fight for social justice and racial equality. And when I need to be called out, call me out, but always call me in, always call me back in, because I recognize that this is not an event, it is a process. And it reminds me a lot of cultural proficiency. Just that reminder that calling out and being an advocate of anti-racism is not a paddle out. It's not a march on Sunday. It's not a one-time donation. It's ongoing. It's daily, and it's going deep into who we are as in terms of our inner selves, and that's cultural proficiency. Cultural proficiency is not an action. It's not an event. It's not a we're going to become culturally proficient. We're going to do cultural proficiency. It's not that at all. It's that really going deep within who we are as individuals, and then eventually being able to impact organizations with our leadership. And when I say leadership, I want to just also emphasize that I'm not talking about leadership that was appointed to us, whether you're a principal or a superintendent or an author, or leadership is really stewardship. And we all, each and every one of us are stewards. And particularly in educational organizations, if our bus drivers don't consider themselves stewards of equity, wow, we have missed a very important point, that leadership is about stewardship. And so I take my stewardship very, very seriously. And thus, I'm really honored to just speak to you for a few minutes. And so, thank you. As I was being asked to just speak briefly, let me just pull this up if I could. Certainly, I know that the book club and the book study has been on cultural proficiency and a manual for school leaders. And what I want to share with you, in my very early years as a superintendent, I had that book, and I underlined it, I tabbed it, I highlighted it, and I used it. I used it as my tool. It was really the first tool that I used in cultural proficiency. And again, I had the incredible privilege of being able to use it with an organization of people who were responsible for 18,000 young people. And so I really pay homage to the book, because it was my tool. And that's how I met Dr. Randy Lindsay, because I think he heard about this superintendent that was really using the work and putting it into practice. And so together, you know, I had the incredible honor of meeting with Randy and the privilege of working with him. And we wrote an article together about the work that we were doing in our district and how we were applying the tools to an organization. And I contacted him again and sat down and said, I think we have another article. And I put it all out in front of him. And he said, no, we don't have an article. And I was so disappointed until he immediately said, what we've got here is a book. And that's how Opening Doors happened. Randy said, you know, I think we've got a book here. And so I felt like I was a student being taught as we were writing this book, and I was being taught by, you know, one of the mentors, not just throughout our communities and our state, but certainly throughout our nation. And so that's how Opening Doors happened. And Opening Doors really is a template, an implementation template for cultural proficiency. It's how do you take this as a site level administrator, as a district administrator, as a teacher, how do you take the tools and actually use them? And so that's the story on Opening Doors and how a manual for school leaders impacted Opening Doors. Then I always wanted to read a book about women in leadership, and I wanted to read a book that related it to cultural proficiency and the leadership of women and the equity and the access issues and the barriers and the support factors that come with being a woman in leadership. And so I remember having a conversation with Dolores and saying, you know, what do you think? And have you ever read that book? And the answer was no. And there's a quote by Toni Morrison that says, if there's a book you want to read and you've never read it, then you must be the one to write it. And so that was so inspiring to read that quote and say, there you go. You know, I have to tell you, I have 2 children, and I was one of those that after the second child, I was like, okay, that's it, I'm done. So I kind of feel like that about this book. You know, this was the book that I really wanted to read, and I was so excited to be a part of writing it. You know, maybe it's the last one for me, but it's one that I deeply care about. And I really want to honor and recognize our third co-author, Stacy Stanley, Dr. Stacy Stanley, who is an assistant superintendent in the state of Minnesota. And we were so fortunate to have Stacy be a part of our trio of writers, and we did a lot of writing around the Lindsay kitchen table. Stacy would fly in from Minnesota. I would drive in from Ventura to Escondido, and Randy would serve us wine. So a lot of this book was written with a glass of wine. I think it got better. It got better with with the wine that flowed. But we had breakfast and dinners and wrote a book really around the kitchen table. But with the book, Kimberly had said, you know, could I relate it to cultural proficiency. And of course, because the book is titled Leading While Female, but it is a culturally proficient response for gender equity. So if you go through the book, you will find the 4 tools outlined and wove in and out throughout the book. So certainly we address the barriers and the guiding principles. We utilize the continuum, and then consistently assessed ourselves with the essential elements. And so again, as you read the Cultural Proficiency Manual, if you were to read this book or the Opening Doors book, you would find these in application. What we did when we wrote the book was we utilized data research and stories, many stories. We had a retreat day where we actually invited women in from across the nation and shared their stories with us. We interviewed people on our own and just consistently listened to the stories. And so the book is really draws upon the research and the data and the stories of feminism, educational leadership, intersectionality, recognizing that the lens of a white woman is not the lens of a woman of color, is not the lens of a woman who is a member of the LGBTQ community, is not necessarily the lens of a woman who does not practice the majority culture faith. So we really did our very best to ensure that our stories and our research were based on intersectionality, and then again, with the foundation of cultural proficiency. Just a reminder and a tie back to the book as you're finishing the book, that the barriers, the guiding principles, the continuum, and the essential elements really became our guiding forces as we wrote the book and drew upon the stories and feminism, the research of feminism, as well as educational leadership. So I know that you have reviewed these in various formats, but what I thought I'd do is just take the very first one, and that was the barriers, and just give you a glimpse of how we utilize the barriers in the research of leading while female. First off, just some very basic data that you may or may not know. That the women in this nation, 77% of the teachers in this nation are women. And then if you look at who we are as women, 80% of the teachers of that 77% are white women. So we can see right here that there is some compelling data that we have not by any means arrived, that our children are not able to look up and find themselves in the public schools in this nation. And we believed that this book was an opportunity to move that data to data that is much more inclusive and representative of all women. If the teachers in the nation, 77% are women, then we would assume that the principals would be about 77%, but lo and behold, 52% of the principals in this nation are women. And again, you can look at who we are. And of those, 54% are elementary school principals and 26 are secondary. Pretty compelling data that we jumped from 77% and then to 52% as site leaders. And then take a look at superintendents. District leaders, we represent now 24% of the superintendents in this nation. And 6% are women of color. Again, a very, very compelling piece of data to say to us as the researchers and the authors that this is important work. When I was a high school student in 1971, I was a sophomore in high school, 1% of the superintendents in this nation were women. So I could not look up and find myself as the leader of a school district to save my soul. When I became a superintendent in 2000, 14% of the women were superintendents. So, when I went into that room full of men in my very first conference, and I was actually redirected to the next building by the host to tell me that the conference for teachers was in the next building. I was in the wrong place. I had to say, oh gosh, I am a superintendent. And she said to me, oh, I'm so sorry, I just assumed you were a teacher. Well, that was because only 14% of us were superintendents at that time. And then I just call to your attention that we're backsliding. 2019, we were 24%. In 2015, we were 27%. We're backsliding. And if we had time, I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on why would we be backsliding in the last 4 years, when from 1971, it has been a slow, incremental increase. But then, for the first time in our history, we say that we're actually backsliding. And obviously, I just pulled out some very basic data to share with you, but that backsliding is a tremendous backslide of women of color as well. And so I have my opinions on that, and be very, very interested to hear yours. Just in normal times, that reminder that men are the majority of the workforce, but this crisis, the pandemic crisis that we are currently in, has flipped that. And we as women are too vital to be halted, because we're the nurses, we're the teachers, we're the grocery store checkers, we're the healthcare workers, we're the in-home workers. So I find it very interesting that we have become the essential workers. But yet when we look at salaries, or when we look at workplace environment, or when we look at promotion opportunities, we have never been considered the essential workers. As I said, we did a lot of listening to stories. So rather than tell you stories, I just want to put a few of the stories we heard up on the screen. I'll let you read these very quickly to yourself as you relate these back to the Culturally Proficient Manual, and back to thinking about the barriers, and being reminded, you know, that barriers are systems of oppression. Barriers are certainly that sense of entitlement. Barriers are organizations that are resistant to change, or those organizations that don't even recognize the need for change. So you will see those in these quotes. We heard that often when we listen to stories. You're not ready yet. You need 2 more years of this. You need to sit in this seat. But as we interviewed our male allies said, you know, I never heard that term referred to men. I never heard someone say he's not ready yet. But I sure heard a lot of people say she's not ready yet. Mm-hmm. How about this one? You're too important for the work you do. How could we possibly lose you out of the special education department and promote you as the assistant superintendent service? We need you. You're too important for the work that you do now. We found, when we looked very specifically at the barriers, and again, you'll see how these fit right into the barriers of cultural proficiency. Traditional pathways, we found, was a very consistent barrier, that women are elementary school teachers. Then sometimes we become TOSA's, teacher on special assignment. Sometimes we become teacher in charge. Maybe we'll become a curriculum coordinator. Then eventually we might become a director of curriculum. Our pathway is not a pathway to the CBO. It's not a pathway to the superintendent. It's not a pathway to the chief technology officer. Yet men start as secondary teachers. Then they become the coach and the assistant principal and the principal, and boom, they're the high school principal, and they are off and running. They are right into that assistant soup of HR, and lo and behold, you know, within a couple of years, they're the superintendent. So we saw that as a tremendous barrier. Myths about women qualifications, that we don't have business acumen, that we're too soft, that we're not courageous enough, that we couldn't handle a large budget, we couldn't handle crises that come our way. Myths about women qualifications. We also found another barrier was that systems are not made for women. Systems are made by men for men. And so when we looked at systems where principals have their meetings from 5 to 7 in the evenings, or superintendents have contracts that actually say you must work 24/7, that's a system that's not made for a woman. That's a system that's made for a man. Or that there are no job shares allowed. It doesn't hurt men, it hurts women. Lack of female mentors, this was one that we came up with again and again, and I'm just pulling out just some top barriers to be able to show you how we utilize the culturally proficient framework to be able to really do our research and put it in to a foundation of cultural proficiency. That lack of female mentors to me is one of the most disappointing in us as females. That we even heard things like women experience kind of a pull up the ladder, I'm up. That, you know, they didn't want other females in the midst. You know, I worked really hard to get here, and so I'm not really willing to mentor the females who come after me. And we speak to that issue a lot in the book, that we must be each other's greatest resources. And we have a quote in the book that, you know, when a female's crown is crooked, straighten her crown and don't even tell her it was crooked. And the last four, just the traditional interview process. We did a lot of looking at the interview process. We actually took the interview process and put it in to the continuum. So we were able to show an interview process that was culturally destructive to an interview process that was culturally proficient, an interview process that was culturally blind, and to be able to see how does that look different. And lo and behold, how do women even get their foot through the door in a traditional interview process that is culturally destructive? So whether it's who's on the panel, or what are the questions, or who are we recruiting, or what's our job description look like, how are we making sure that it's a culturally proficient process? We also found that that we are a barrier ourselves, and that women often lack confidence, although we do not lack competence. Our doctoral programs, our masters in ed leadership are filled with women. We are very competent, but we lack the confidence. We say to ourselves, I'm not sure I'm ready. You know, gosh, you know, I'm just not sure. Maybe I need a couple more years. Maybe I need to do this job first. And we found that our male counterparts were just the opposite. They lacked competence, but they had confidence. And I don't mean that disparaging, that our male allies are not competent individuals. But what we did find was that they were much more likely to jump before they had the competence. They gained the competence, but they were much more likely, because they had the confidence, to jump without the competence. And certainly delays along the way. We are child rearers. We take care of our elderly parents. We follow our partners to other communities. And again, we never meant to insinuate that this wasn't a wonderful aspect of who we are as women. But we did want to make sure that we recognized it as a barrier along the way. And then just cultural norms and duality. And this is when we looked at intersectionality and all of the aspects of being a woman of color, a woman leader of color versus a white woman leader, and all of the various culture norms and the duality that comes with that, and recognizing that the data I shared with you in the beginning is indicative of a culture and a system that needs a major overhaul when it comes to ensuring that our children can look up and find themselves. Here's one last barrier quote. You're definitely qualified for the job, but the job would require you to stay late and lock up. Just can't ask a woman to do that. And I'll call out my friend and colleague and mentor, Dolores. That was said to her. She did not get a job because a male felt like, you know, she'd have to lock up, and that would just be a little more than we could ask of women. And so I come to a close by saying we're very capable of locking up. You know, give us the keys. And not only can we hold the key to open the doors, no pun intended, but we have the keys to be extremely strong and proficient educational leaders. And as I tie it back to the manual in my closing, relate our work and back to the manual. And to me, every single aspect of my work has related back to the manual for school leadership and cultural proficiency. And chapter 10 is it's a moving into action it's going deeper. It's utilizing the tools. It's being reminded that this is a process, not an event. And it's with that tenacity and commitment and resolve. And I would say it's with that resolve really at all costs. And so I really relate it to where we are in this really horrific view of our nation right now. And, you know, having to each and every one of us, and I'll just talk about myself again, take complete responsibility for who I am, my actions, my behaviors, and to be absolute certain that I am doing my part, not as an event, but as a process, as a daily process. And so I believe that the Manual for School Leaders is so very relevant to where we are right now today, regardless of when it was written. And you know, the unfortunate aspect of there's so much in the book that is rich with history, but there's also so much of the book that is all about our future. And so I thank you for just letting me just share a little bit of our work and how I relate it back to the manual and my early days, and the extreme gratitude I have for having those as a leader. So thank you. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trudy Arriaga. Well said.
Thank you.
I am going to share, I'm just going to piggyback off of what Dr. Arriaga said when she spoke to tying everything back to the manual. I will be remiss without saying that the manual, it's changed my life. And I got to call out a person that's on here. She'll probably be like, why you do that? But I'm just going to do it. If I hadn't met Nicole Anderson, we wouldn't have this live right now. So you guys didn't see the behind the scenes. I wish we had bloopers, but they were like, oh, hi, everybody. And she's so humble. You know, when you think about humanity, you think about a person. I mean, she just gave me a book. And one day I asked her, why'd you just give me this book? But I thank her for it. I know why. This is why. So with that being said, I thank you, Nicole. I just feel like forever indebted to you because you've really helped evoke something in me. I know that was there, but I believe that you saw something in me. And I'm going to continue to do this work. The Manual for School Leaders, that's the foundation. So I want to tell you that I use that in my everyday work. My lens has been changed. I'm on my journey. And now the next book study, well, we're going to go into everyone else who's poured into the work as well, and they're doing the work now. But I want to share something just in case everyone doesn't stay on for the entire hour and a half. The next book study is going to be a book, and we'll show it in a minute. It's called Reconcile. So you'll have 2 weeks to get your book. And the reason why that book is next, because we're going to dive right back into culture proficiency work and use some of the other tools and other books that have been written with the culture proficiency lens. But I'm going to tell you the why we're going to use Reconcile starting July 2nd. And it's going to be in partnership. It's going to be a surprise with another consultant. But so many times people say, we need to do this. We need to change the system that is not set up for us. We know this. We know all these things. But I want to tell you something. A lot of people who are in the positions for change, they don't know how to do it. And if they do know how to do it, you have people in those positions who don't want to do it. So why don't we empower each other? And that's what this platform is about. So if you are interested in Reconcile, you have 2 weeks to get your book. Well, actually 3. We're not going to start till July 2nd. On next Thursday, I will be live again with the partner who will be partnering with me on this work. I'm going to save that until the 18th. But just, I want you to take a snapshot of it. And this is going to help you if you read it, read some information and reviews on it. It's going to help you learn some of the skill sets needed to have that conversation. And it's also you reflecting on yourself when you read this book. You're just like the culture proficiency book. It's about us. It's about us. We got to check ourselves. We got to learn what we need to do and recognize our biases and where we are. So this is the book that we're going to start on July 2nd. So I hope you guys will get your order in, and then we're going to dive back into the content of culture proficiency. So I'm going to share several books on the 18th that I have. Thank you, Dolores and Randy. So I'm going to share different books, and then we're going to vote on what's going to be our next culture proficiency read. But I'm going to just take you into another form of building your skill set and sharpening your tools within yourself. So with that being said, I have some amazing leaders on, and I'm going to let you choose who wants to go first. But Kikanza was on, but she has another meeting. So I have Nicole on, both Dr. Lindsay, Dolores, and Randy, and I see Dr. Pete Flores is on, and Nicole Anderson. So you have 5 minutes each at this time. Like, this is priceless. And then we're going to have Q&A at the end. So, and oh, Stephanie, I'm so sorry. I have Stephanie Graham Rivas on. Please forgive me, Stephanie. Thank you. All right. So whoever wants to go first, I don't want to put nobody on the spot.
Well, good evening, everybody. Stephanie, you want to go first? You're on the top row.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say, necessarily about culture proficiency. And I know everybody's heard this in the last couple of weeks, but like Nicole says, I'm really tired. I'm really tired too, but I'm afraid to go to sleep or go to bed because I'm going to miss a conversation. I'm so excited about the conversations that are being had in public and on TV. I never thought I would see this. So I think that's just wonderful, long time coming, and here we are. I was watching the Oprah shows the last couple of nights, and they were very good. I thought she had very good people. And we you've heard it before, like 2 months ago, this was a new comment for me, a new statement for me, but now it's all over, whether it's Angela Davis or Ibram Kendi, the notion that it's not enough to be not to be racist. We have to all be anti-racist and discover what that means. And I really like the way Kendi kind of pushes us, challenges us to look at the intersection of all oppression, right? That right now what's happening is very pointed around racism, but we have to remember that during civil rights, there was a moral fusion of coalitions, and we cannot forget the coalitions. I'm waiting for people to get as angry as they did about George Floyd is what's happening at the border, is what's happening, with First Nations. That has to happen. So I think when I think about what can we do as anti-racists, what can we do as white advocates, what can we do as Black allies, as Black advocates, it's to really foment this conversation wherever we happen to see the oppression. I think that's really, really important to not lose the anger and not lose the energy, and to help transport it and transfer it to other examples. So that's really all I'm wanting to say, is that we remember the intersectionality, and we remember the lesson about the moral imperative for fusing and for coalition building. That's really all I have to add at this point. The conversations are wonderful. I'm blown away. I never thought I'd see them. It's like, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Good for the nation. Good for us.
Speak your truth. Thank you very much for sharing.
Pete, what do you have to say? Unmute your mic.
You know, I'm a man of few words.
Yeah. She said 5 minutes or less.
Okay. I really believe we need to go from being transformational to being transformative, and this is the moment. If you ever get the chance, read Carolyn Shields' work on transformative leadership. It's about creating schools, not improving schools, but creating schools the way they need to be, or they ought to be. And so, when I'm in conversations about the next school year, I don't want to go back to normal. You know, we got to quit looking at it that way, because normal wasn't serving all kids. And so I think we actually have a great opportunity right now to create an educational system that's going to really service all kids. And that means that the status quo, or the framework we're used to, it may be time to create a new one. I mean, you know, virtual learning is not all bad. As somebody recently told me, was there a steep learning curve? Sure, there was for some kids, more for others, right? But it's also preparing kids to go into higher education. And so it kind of forces some things. And I think it really does depend on the lens through which we see the moment. And, you know, my daughter surprised me because she said a comment that made me feel pretty good. She says, "This isn't a moment, this is a movement." But, you know, we need to make sure that that moment gets extended out with the movement, you know? So, you know, I really think we're at a tipping point. And, you know, I've had so many conversations with so many people that I don't think otherwise I would have had. And so, you know, let's take advantage of that, and let's put our best skills to good use to keep people in the room. You know, I've always been told, once you open the conversation, you got to stay in the room. And so, you know, that's where the tools of cultural proficiency have really helped me out. Am I under 5 minutes? I hope.
That's the best ever. Nicole, would you share with us?
Yes, ma'am. I tell you, I don't know if I have anything profound to say right now, except that I'm honored to be in this space with people who have been pioneers in this work. You know, I think about, gosh, why am I here? Why am I in this circle? Why was I, you know, called to, you know, be, you know, a presenter and a speaker and a facilitator and a coach of educators of all sorts, you know, from board members to principals and teachers, you name it, in other industries. And I think about being on this call, you know, with Trudy and Stephanie and Randy and Dolores, and Pete. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, by the way. Yeah, I missed those rides. And even, you know, being in the space with Kim, where I'm just seeing how this work has landed, and just am appreciative, I guess. I'm honored, I'm humbled. I don't think that I'm any better than anyone else in knowing, you know, more. And Dolores, I have to say, I've used this quote that I don't even know you remember you said this, but I've been learning that I'm expert enough to know I'm not culturally proficient every day. And I've been humbled by being on this call, because I remember the moments of starting this work and meeting Stephanie. I call her Mama Stephanie. And those of you know Stephanie well, you know why we call her Mama Stephanie. You know, just appreciate, you know, all of the pioneering that's been done when working at an association like AXA, which is a phenomenal place in California that impacts so many administrators around the state and really around the nation. But that pioneering of the work and staying in the trenches when it got hard and people pushed back and they weren't accepting, you know, this transformation of an organization that, you know, has some history that hasn't always treated everyone, you know, equitably. So I'm appreciative of all that I've learned from all of you on the call. In particular, you know, you being authors, Dolores and Randy, just always being cheerleaders of this work. And constantly being humbled and being, you know, models of being a learner. Yeah, I just appreciate that. But also what you've done in the trenches to be allies, I think is huge in this work. And I just appreciate you modeling for me how I should lead this work as well. And because of that, you know, there's so many people who give kudos to me, but I always have to give kudos to those that came before me. So again, I don't have anything profound to say. All I can say is ditto what Stephanie said. I'm just thankful the conversations have gone to a new level. We've been doing this work for a long time, and you know, nothing is new. Just people started getting upset all of a sudden, right? There's a lot of George Floyds. There's a lot. This has been going on. I try to turn the TV off the last couple of weeks. I haven't watched them a lot because that over traumatization of watching it over and over and being kind of a normalized experience has really been hard. So I'm super tired. I'm like, I need to just take a nap. That's a strategy. I think Zaretta Hammond might have mentioned that on one of her posts recently, is, that's our weapon right now, is get some rest so we can be ready in these trenches. So Kim, again, thank you for the opportunity to provide some insight during your book study process. I did hand that book to you because I saw that you were ready to do the work. And sometimes you just need the book just with the tools on how to do it, because I recognized that as an African-American woman leading this work is not easy. And we need the strategies. We need to know how to meet people where they are. And the book really helped, as Trudy said, having that tool. So just thankful that you took it to a new level and liberating others who needed to have exposure to it. So just thankful to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is Shelley still on the call? She's not showing on my screen. Maybe she'll come back with us. And I think Ray Terrell is going to join us in a little bit.
No, I saw Shelley, but I don't see her on here anymore.
Okay. I just want to share with folks that chapter 10 in this book, like many of our other books, it may not be chapter 10 in some of the other books. It's chapter 9 in this book. It may be chapter 7 in another book and chapter 8 in another book, but it's a call to action. And we decided in writing a lot of the books that the books had to end with not only an invitation, but a call. And we didn't want to leave the books just open-ended. So we have, in the last several books, given a template to guide folks into how do you develop an action plan. And not just an action plan, but an action plan based on 5 essential elements. And that those elements are there to help you align with whatever the current vision or mission is in your organization. And a young administrator told me recently, a young teacher told me recently that she took this action plan to her principal and said, could we develop something like this? And her principal said, we haven't looked at our vision statement in our district in so long, I'm not sure we can even find it now. And so when you begin to pull up action plans, we now put the word equity action plan. And so it's not just an action plan to do something, it's to do something specifically around the inequities. And I think that what the conversation across the nation recently has helped us see again are the inequities that we don't want to see. And I think when we talk about privilege and entitlement, those of us who are entitled to see things we don't want to see, and we're entitled in a way we don't have to see them. So when we put a template in front of folks and say, okay, now go find the inequities, sometimes we find things we don't want to see. And that's even the cultural blindness that's in the continuum. Either we don't see them or we're pretending that we don't see them. And when somebody on a team says, well, wait a minute, here's some additional data we haven't even looked at. And this shows us some inequities we haven't seen before. And so when we begin to find those things, we can actually experience, and Pete mentioned a tipping point. It could also be a cultural shift. It could be a turning point. It could be a paradigm shift. People begin to see things they had not seen before. So in that chapter 9 of the manual, just having folks say, when they say, I don't know what to do, and when Kendi talked about the difference, we can say, I'm not a racist. Well, then what are you going to do about it? It's not just okay to say I'm not. So what he says is there has to be some action to show that you're not a racist. Just saying it's not enough. So the anti-racist is the equity action plan in the words of cultural proficiency. So it's always been there in our language to say do something about it. And so use that template. There are other action plans in some of the other books, but this is the one that has the equity action plan. And then this particular book, the chapter 10, is a book that is a chapter that we ask our co-author, Randy, to put in this particular book because it's a piece that he had written before. And I'm going to ask him if it's okay, Kim, if he speak a little bit to this chapter 10. Would you do that for us, Randy? Because there's some pieces in this chapter 10 that we didn't know might come back around so quickly that we'd be having a current conversation about something in chapter 10 that happened several years ago.
I wrote chapter 10, I guess 5 years ago, just as stuff was blowing up in Baton Rouge and Dallas and Minnesota. And I went back and read it again this afternoon after Kimberly called my attention to it. And I could have written it yesterday. You know, things have not changed. So to that extent, you know, the chapter 10 for me is that the work is continuous and ongoing. And the metaphor that surfaced for me in this conversation, being with such good friends, I'll tell you, it's just wonderful seeing all of you, and Nicole and Terry and Pete and Trudy and Kimberly and people's names I can't see, and Stephanie, who told me one day, AXA is going to do equity work. I said, what? She said, AXA is going to do equity work. They got a dynamite person to do it. You've got to be kidding me. So you're all very special to me, and seeing the work that Renee's doing in your district, just tremendously impressive. The analogy that comes to my mind right now is law enforcement is at the crosshairs. And I'm going to suggest those 4 officers have parallels at every school and school district in the United States. And I think that as we move forward with this work, not going back and beating up our colleagues, but who are the people who have their neck on kids? Who are the people who are standing and watching?
Your knees on kids, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we really have to be real clear about that. An asset we have today we didn't have 10 years ago is data are accessible. And now we have to do is have the courage to take the data and help our colleagues make sense of it. And the equity plan that Dolores identified is really important. Just a footnote on Trudy. When I first met Trudy, and a mutual friend of ours had introduced me to the fact that Trudy was doing the work in Ventura. And I said, really? I said, who's the consultant? And she said, Trudy doesn't need a consultant, she can read. And so I see like the work that, you know, that you're doing in your district, Renee, just, you know, people take the initiative to do the work. It's not complicated. What it takes is just the willingness to be able to have the conversations with self and with others. In talking with Ray Terrell yesterday, and we were lamenting, you know, all the things that are going on right now. And he made an observation that really stuck with me because I hadn't gotten there yet. And he said, this time things are different. The coalitions are different. The attention is different. And if I go back, you know, just in our 50 years of history, every time there's been a major event like this, there are, if you're willing to take the steps, there are opportunities that didn't exist yesterday. And I know I'm talking to the choir here, but I think as we do our work with our colleagues, it's not about going back and beating them up or making people feel guilty. It's about saying, what is it we're willing to do? As a teacher of history, I think one of the things I saw on Twitter today, and somebody said, until we write US history like it actually happened, it's gonna be hard to do this work. And I really believe that. I think that as we continue doing the work, we have to introduce our colleagues to the fact that this country was founded on genocide that continues. I think our people understand that enslavement was not something that was antiseptic. It was very, very deliberate. The indentured servitude, all of those things were part of our history. But the democracy has been one that we can evolve beyond that. But it takes intentionality to do that. And so each epoch in our history has provided that kind of impetus. It's always at the expense of the people who are the targets. And I think that's the language we have today that we didn't have a generation ago, that we can continue working with our colleagues and the parents and communities we serve to see the authenticity of the inequities that exist in our system. And the metaphor that I like to use is we've not yet attained the level of a democratic society. We're not an inclusive society yet, but we have the opportunity to keep moving that direction. And moving that direction, not at a deliberate speed, but quickly. So that's just my ruminations here on this afternoon.
I think what's important, you know, while I really enjoyed watching Oprah and she had incredible people on, I thought, gee, it's too bad there's not a white person here, because this isn't just a conversation for a single group. So I really appreciate, Kimberly, that you've invited a lot of people to this conversation, especially because I think white people need to see modeled for them what it looks like when white people are having this conversation, that we're not always just silent and asking questions and don't know what to do. We can participate in this conversation. And I think it's really important to model and show people what that white alliance looks like. So I thank you for trusting, Kimberly, that that those of us who were not necessarily African American had something to say on this topic and something worthwhile.
And I thank you for basically being what I call vulnerable. Well, Brene Brown coined as vulnerable. And vulnerability is what this is about too. I really thank you for sharing that, Stephanie, because I will tell you that I've had individuals say to me, you know, why do you have certain people on your show? Like, it's hard. How are we going to learn, you know? And I truly believe in my heart of heart that the only way we're going to learn is together. In our local TV news station here, they would say, the more you know. And I changed that to the more we know. So the only way we're going to learn about each other and understand each other is to be able to have conversations with one another. And so this is who I am. I know we don't all live together, but the more you get to know me, I've always been a lover of people, of knowing who you are. That's why I'm in education. I want to know about my students. I had a peer share this, and if she ever gets to watch it, she was my intern at my school site that I work at. And our counselors had developed and said, hey, we're going to have a cultural day. And our kids wore their cultural regalia from Ethiopia, from Mexico, from Brazil, and they were just walking with pride. They had never had one before. And my intern came to me and she said, and we were putting on our African American attire, you know, because we don't know what tribe we came from, me and one of my peers. And afterwards, the intern got emotional and said, can I tell you something? I have to go home and apologize to my husband. And I'm like, I don't know what, I was taken back. I was confused. And she said, I tease my husband because his mom always wants him to wear this hat and his boots. And he said, I saw the students in the same things that he wears with pride and that I was embarrassed of. And I don't know the specific titles of it, but she was, she considers herself Hispanic. That's what she identifies with in regards to her, where she came from, because some people say Latina, Latino, but she said, we're Hispanic. And she said, but I used to really just, I would be embarrassed if he would wear that. But I'm going to apologize to my husband and I'm going to let our kids start. She said, it just did something to me to see how much pride the kids had. Our little Latina girls had flowers on their head, different hair dressings. And we had a student that was from India, had on the regalia. And it just, you know, so thank you for sharing that, because I think we all need to be at the table, Stephanie. This is how we're going to learn about each other. And that's what culture is about, you know. I shared with Trudy that I'm in a sorority and we have a culture as well, you know what I mean? And the Pan-Hellenic, and believe it or not, on the campus when we were at Fresno State, the Caucasian organizations, they didn't want to recognize the Pan-Hellenic. Like, you guys are not Greek, but if you really know your history and where we all come from, that's another conversation. Right. But I remember that at Fresno State, but I had leaders at Fresno State who looked like me, Dr. Francino Puta, just so many that poured into us. And we had a cultural diversity center there, and I do so many things with Dr. Francino Puta. If you don't know her, a beautiful woman inside and out. I love her dearly. But that, I know, is what hooked me to culture and wanting to treat and love everybody. And that's what I truly feel in my heart of hearts. And I love myself. You know, some people think when you're proud about yourself that you're only about your culture. No, you can be proud of who you are and love other cultures as well. So I thank you all. Like, I'm emotional because I told it was a peer who's mentoring me that I just like did this off the fly, and people really follow me. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. Our last Thursday show, we had 800 people view. So
Wow.
thank God for this gift. And
Wow.
I'm going to continue to take the torch. And I thank you guys for listening to me. Like, I'm like, thank you for helping this platform come to fruition. And the goal of this platform, there's a link in there. Put your email or anyone, share with anyone that you know that wants to know what we're doing going forward. And I say I'm a team of one, I'll say two. I have my friend Karis down here. She's my production person. So it's a team of two. We don't even have a big team. And she listens to me talk about what I'm doing. I do it and I just do it. And I started a YouTube channel. So I'm going to take all these videos and put them on a YouTube channel. So if you guys want to go back or send someone to it, my daughter showed me how to authenticate it. So it's not on there today. It takes 24 hours to be authenticated. So I'm learning. And you can go back and watch these videos on the YouTube channel. I'll be working on that within this week. And I'll share it if you fill out the little form. I'm going to share the link to the YouTube channel. It's Let's Talk About Culture KL. And I'll continue to put the videos in there even when we start Reconcile. So if you don't have time, you can go to my YouTube channel and we'll continue to spread the word. And the end goal I want to share with everybody is to be able to be vulnerable. So I thank you, Stephanie, to be able to be vulnerable to have these conversations and to equip individuals with the tools to be vulnerable. It's hard, it takes time. So right now we're practicing. So for you guys to get on here and be live, like, it freaks some people out, I'll tell you. But we're being an example and we're talking like authentically right now. And so we're touching people who go on after and listen to you. So I thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like,
Thank
I
you.
will continue to share. Where this goes, I don't know, because I didn't have a plan. But wherever God takes this is what we're going to do. So just keep hashtagging and come back and check in on Let's Talk About Culture. And I'll be back next Thursday. So join me if you're available or if you know someone who will benefit from these conversations. So enjoy your evening. It is 6:29. We finished early. So we didn't even go till 7 o'clock, but that's all right. See, that's how it works. You just go with the flow.
That's right.
So if anybody else wants to share, go right ahead, and we're going to close out. Renee, I would love for you to say something. I've never met you in person, but this lady right here, she is fire. I have to meet you in person one day. Renee Bryant, please share something.
I would love to meet you in person, and thank you for doing this. It's very inspirational, and thank you. As you said, vulnerability is so important, so thank you for modeling the way and being vulnerable and transparent, and thank you for just opening this up to everyone. I've been sharing it, so I'll be back, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
How
you.
about Hortensia? Can you say your name for me?
Hortensia.
I was about to say you are fired, but I won't go there because you're my sister now.
Okay.
Nicole and I have worked together in the past. We're equity warriors. And I am so proud to be amongst this group of warriors and change agents. And I love that our circles are overlapping. So thank you, Dr. Renee Bryant and the team. I have worked in equity and access with Nicole. I'm also VP for my AXA Region 3. And I am fully proud of my heritage, and I'm here to do the work. And I am starting a book study with my staff. I'm currently a principal of a dual immersion school, and we are starting with white fragility. And I taught in LAUSD in the heart of South Central for 10 years. My son is bilingual, biliterate. He's biracial, Black Mexicano. So we are very proud to stand in who we are and walk in our truth and be authentic and honest every day. So I live and walk in it daily. And when you were talking about regalia, I'm like, oh, I'm totally wearing my blouse today. But tomorrow I will be wearing my We Stay Woke shirt because we're doing that book study tomorrow. So thank you. It's a pleasure to meet everybody.
Thank you for sharing too. Come on, Terry and Kathy, you guys have been on the whole ride. You got to say something.
I know. I knew I'd have to say something. This is wonderful, Kimberly. I mean, I'm so glad that you provided this opportunity for all of us. And it's so good to see so many people, you know, that are just doing the work together, you know, no matter how we do it, where we do it, we're all doing it together. So I've enjoyed the cultural proficiency training I got with the Lindsays, and Nicole, I love your work. I just love, you know, doing this work with so many of you. And my path is going to divert a little bit because I'm retiring this year from my district. So, but that just opens me up to a whole new world. I'm not tied down to 8 to 5. I can do this work 24/7 if I want. But yeah, so I'm real excited about that. So thank you guys, and thank you, Kimberly. I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you,
None of us gets to retire from this work. It just doesn't happen. And
that's right.
I think now there's a CPDNA strain. So if any of us did something through Ancestry.com, I'm sure we'd all come out related, you know, as a certain percentage CP. So,
and that's why I don't say, I just say retired from an 8 to 5.
That's right.
Retired from the work. Thank you.
Come on, Kathy.
Kimberly, thank you so much for including me in this group. Oh my God, what a bunch of dynamic people. I'm gonna miss this. So I'm glad that you're gonna do more. I've learned so much. And in this last week, I was telling Kim yesterday, everybody, that I had some emails and correspondence from people that I went to bed and I was so sad. I was so sad that people think the way that they do. And I woke up the next day and I said, you know what? I can't control what anybody else does, but I can live by example, and I can learn. And I'm a junior warrior, and I'm learning, and I want to be with you guys, and I want to do the right thing. And that's what I've always wanted in my heart. And, you know, and I love all of you, and I'm so glad to meet you. And I hope that we can all see each other sometime in person. And Kim, I love you. Thank you very much. In the Bay Area, we'll have some of this because I'm bringing it here.
All right. Love you, Kathy.
Love you
Okay,
too.
Trudy, I want you to close us out.
We have, who is it, India? India?
Oh, that's my daughter.
Well,
that's my legacy.
Hear from her.
India, you got to come on. This is going to be yeah. Come on in the room, India. Let's see if she comes on.
I did not know that.
You didn't?
No.
That's my daughter. Let's see if she'll get on.
Okay. Being shy.
Okay.
Okay, you're not going to hear from India.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I just am really honored to be a part of the discussion and to be able to share some of the work with you this evening. But recently someone said to me that, oh, you know, this is great. You know, now people are going to have a seat at the table. And that just didn't set well with me. And, you know, my response was, no, I think we're looking for people to have a voice at the table, not a seat at the table. And I also think that the table doesn't belong to anyone. So you don't get to have a seat at my table or I have a seat at your table. That we're going to have voices at a table that we all set. And so I'm really privileged to be, you know, to have a voice at the table. And I take my voice seriously, and I just really, really appreciate having the opportunity to get to see people and also get to meet a few people that I haven't met before. So thank you so much, Kimberly. And
That's awesome.
carry
I
on.
have another peer named Tanya. I want to see if Tanya wants to share. Okay, she said no, thank you. That's okay. So thank you for joining us, Tanya. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone. Any closing words from the Lindsays? Karis?
I would like to say, Randy and I had, to many people, had announced our retirement about a year ago, that we were phasing out as far as formal consulting and work, and that didn't work out too well. We realized, as Stephanie said, we've retired from institutions, but we haven't retired from the profession. And so we are in the work, and those of you that are maybe retiring from K-12 or higher ed, or there's just so much work to be done. And I was listening today on radio, and someone compared to what's happening now to George Floyd, and the response to that as to what happened to Emmett Till many years ago. And do we have to do this again? And there was also comments made that maybe this is showing a cultural shift in our nation that we've never seen before, that people are engaged in conversations like we've never seen before. And maybe it's because of cameras, maybe it's because of social media. I don't care what it is that's causing people to have conversations we haven't had before, that we can, as Kimberly says, we can move forward. It's really about moving forward. The pain from years and years ago and the pain from 2 and 3 weeks ago is real. And so the conversations need to be authentic and real. So when we have letters from CEOs that appear in our inboxes, national letters that are appearing, and people saying it's going to be different, let's hold each other to that. Let's hold each other accountable for things being different this time.
Yeah.
And stand up and speak out and call each other out, and let's get this thing right. And Kathy, your comments, as close family members and close friends of mine see life differently, we can't let that get in our way. As folks want to say, the few bad apples routine, the agenda that's been out there for many, many years about it's really not that way. It's just bad things happen. We're going to move beyond those. We can't let those things get in the way again. And so thank you and everybody on. And again, Kimberly, thank you so much for putting these events together. If you and Renee ever get together in this, conducting the same events, please let the rest of us know, because it will be dynamic in every sense of the word. So again, thank you.
Closing comment that I'd like to make is in the book, the chapter that was most challenging for companies to take a look at to agree to publish the book was the privilege entitlement chapter. And I just want to say that the ultimate privilege entitlement is if we choose to do nothing. I think that becomes the work of what distinguishes this collection of people is we choose not to be silent, but to move forward with intent. I'm so proud to be a part of this group and see the good work that you're doing. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you, thank you all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
The
Trudy.
link is in the chat if you want information about future book studies and our resource list that we're going to develop, please fill out the tiny URL.
Sounds good.
And
All right.
I have,
Have a
one
good
more, I have
evening.
one more thing to say.
Yes.
So this is what I'm doing. Buy your books from Black-owned bookshops. Go to Black restaurants, and any place in your community. I looked for a product that goes in one of those little burners, and I looked all over the country for a Black woman that works for that company, and I finally found one in Los Angeles. And post that and buy it from them and support their communities and put money in their pockets, because they're working 3 and 4 jobs to live in poverty. Let's make a change.
Good idea.
Love you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Stephanie. Gonna miss you guys. Bye.
Miss you too. We're all here. We're just a phone call away.
Thank you.
Bye. Love you.
All right.
Love you.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
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 How do I sign up? Stop video.